At 29,000 feet, the air is so thin that your body begins to shut down. Muscles weaken, lungs fill, and thoughts blur. Climbers call it the death zone. Here, mistakes are rarely forgiven. Over the decades, Mount Everest has claimed over 340 lives. Some fell in storms. Some collapsed from exhaustion. Some froze just steps from safety. And many of them remain on the mountain, frozen in place, silent witnesses to everyone who follows. Their stories reveal the thin line between survival and death, and the choices people make when survival is at stake. From legendary climbers who fell in a single storm to the tragedies of 2025, these are the deaths that define Everest. For much of the 20th century, Everest was a place for only the boldest expeditions. But by the 1990s, guiding companies were leading paying clients to the top. That shift came into sharp focus in May 1996, when a sudden storm turned the mountain into chaos. One of the men who never came back was Scott Fisher. He wasn't a reckless client. He was one of the most respected guides of his era, known for summiting Everest without oxygen and leading Mountain Madness, one of the top guiding companies. On May 10th, Fisher pushed for the summit with his team. Bottlenecks slowed the climb. Ropes weren't fixed in time. The weather window began to close. Still, he pressed on, reaching the top hours later than planned. On the descent, Fisher faltered. He was already ill, possibly with high-altitude pulmonary edema. His pace slowed to a crawl. Sherpas tried to help, dragging him down the ridge. But the effort was too great. That night, he collapsed near the south summit. Guides reached him, but he was barely conscious, his oxygen gone, his gear open to the freezing wind. They stayed as long as they could, but the storm was raging. Fisher's body was moved off the trail and left in the snow. He had lived by the mantra, get up, get down, and get out. But even one of the strongest climbers of his generation couldn't beat Everest's margins. The 1996 storm killed 8 climbers in a single day, the worst disaster the mountain had seen at the time. It was a turning point, a reminder that on Everest, even the best could die. Not everybody on Everest belongs to a famous climber. Some become known only by what they wore. In 1996, the same year Fisher died, a climber commonly believed to be Tsewang Paljor vanished near the summit during a blizzard. His body came to rest in a small limestone alcove at 27,900 feet. The neon plastic boots on his feet stood out in the snow, and over time, he became known simply as Green Boots. For years, green boots marked the route for climbers on the northeast side, a grim reminder that they were in the death zone. A decade later, in 2006, another climber reached that cave. His name was David Sharp. He was attempting Everest solo, without Sherpas, without oxygen, on one of the cheapest expeditions available. At some point in the night, he collapsed next to Green Boots, alive, but barely moving. Dozens of climbers passed him the next morning. Some thought he was already dead. Some heard him groan. A few tried to help, but no one stayed. By dawn the next day, David Sharp was gone. When the news spread, outrage followed. How could 40 climbers walk past a dying man? Why didn't anyone share oxygen or try to carry him down? The answers were brutal. At that altitude, most climbers can hardly save themselves. Radios fail, teams are scattered, and Sharp had no one looking for him. Green Boots and David Sharp became two of Everest's most famous bodies, symbols of how fragile life is at 28,000 feet and how thin the margin for humanity can become. Everest's deadliest moments didn't stop in 1996 or 2006. Each decade brought its own tragedies. In 2012, a Canadian climber named Shreya Shah Chlorophene reached the summit after hours stuck in a bottleneck near the top. She posed with her country's flag, exhausted but triumphant. On the descent, her oxygen ran out. Guides tried to help, but she collapsed just a few hundred feet below the summit ridge. Other climbers later described stepping over her body as they made their way down. She was one of 4 who died in a single day that season, all victims of delays and overcrowding high on the ridge. Her bright red downsuit was visible from far below, another stark reminder of how quickly triumph on Everest can turn into tragedy. In 2014, a massive ice serac collapsed into the Khumbu icefall, burying 16 Sherpas who were carrying loads for commercial teams. It was the single deadliest day in Everest's history, and it exposed the imbalance of risk. Sherpas bear the greatest danger, often to support climbers chasing their dream of a summit photo. The following year, a 7.8 earthquake struck Nepal. At base camp, avalanches roared down from the surrounding peaks, flattening tents and killing at least 22 people. Survivors described it as the mountain itself exploding. And in 2019, Everest became infamous again. A photo of a traffic jam on the southeast ridge went viral, a line of climbers stretching down the summit ridge, waiting for hours in the death zone. That year, 11 climbers died, many from exhaustion and lack of oxygen while trapped in bottlenecks. These stories weren't just about bad weather or accidents. They showed how overcrowding, poor management, and pressure to summit could turn Everest into a deadly trap. That history set the stage for the spring of 2025. This year, Nepal issued over 400 permits for foreign climbers. With Sherpas, porters, and guides included, nearly 900 people attempted the mountain. But the weather was harsh. Summit windows lasted only a few hours to a day, forcing hundreds to climb at once. On May 14th, a Filipino climber named Philip Santiago II prepared for his summit bid. Days earlier, he had been caught in an avalanche and injured. After a short rest at base camp, he pushed on with his team, reaching Camp 4 at 26,000 feet. Exhausted, he lay down in his tent to rest and never woke up. Within hours, another tragedy struck the same expedition. A schoolteacher from West Bengal, Subrat Das, began his summit push with his Sherpa guide. They climbed slowly through the night, reaching the Hillary Step by late morning. Behind them, lines of climbers stretched up the ridge. Ahead, the summit gleamed in the afternoon sun. Das insisted on continuing, despite warnings. He reached the summit at 2 p.m., far too late, and collapsed on the descent. His Sherpa tried to drag him down, but Das stopped moving, his vision gone, his body failing. They spent hours in the cold, but as night fell, the Sherpa was forced to leave him behind and stumble down alone. His final words to his team at Camp 4 were simple: "He's gone." By season's end, Everest had claimed 5 lives in 2025. A Sherpa died of altitude sickness at base camp. Another suffered a brain hemorrhage. A third had a heart attack at Camp 1. The 2 foreign climbers, Santiago and Das, completed the grim total. Rescue helicopters flew constantly, even to Camp 3 at 23,500 feet, one of the highest flight zones in the world. More than 100 rescue calls were made that month. Without those pilots, the death toll would have been much higher. From Scott Fisher in 1996, to Green Boots and David Sharp, to the tragedies of 2025, the pattern is always the same. Everest punishes hesitation. It punishes ambition. It punishes the smallest mistake. The bodies that remain on its slopes are not just reminders of those who came before. They are warnings to those who still climb, that on Everest, survival is never guaranteed. The summit is optional. Coming back down is not. If you enjoy stories of deadly mountains and impossible climbs, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments which peak I should cover next.